broadcasting in a sense, the way we have it with radio, FM. In the States, it's country music, classical music, modern classical. It's very for a narrow audience.
So narrowcasting, so there's a split up of the audiences in smaller fragments.
Yeah, right.
So there is no, beyond the American Idol show, there's no American public anymore?
It's interesting. The television, when we had three networks, played a role of the town square, and people had stuff in common. When I was a kid, I would go to school, and we didn't have a TV. My parents were intellectual snobs, so all the kids would be talking about, did you see Lucy last night? Lucille Ball, and I hadn't seen it, and I felt left out. So, that's what these three networks did, and we don't have that anymore. There's a tremendous diversity. I really don't know what's going to play the role of unifier. It could be Google. I don't see anything at the moment, but something will.
Would you trust them to do it?
Well, actually, Google's going into the journalism business, and I don't know the people who are doing it. I hear they're okay. They have some good people. The Google News is crazy. It's like a robot runs it. So, there's no human mind selecting the news. Frankly, it's just as good in many ways. So, as long as they had competitors, I'd trust them. I'm not too worried.
So what we see is algorithms taking the place of journalism?
Yeah, that's right. The algorithm in chief, the managing algorithm, the foreign algorithm.
Okay, so back again to the question, Columbia University, students come, they want to be journalists. You're not dissuading them. You say go for it.
It's an institution that needs money. I hate to admit it, but we need more students financially. So we are not probably being as responsible in a way as we could be by saying, don't come and pay. It's very expensive to come to the school. It's $43,000 just for tuition. No, we're not dissuading them. Maybe we should. I don't know.
Do you think it will have repercussions in the education system as well? That fees like this will be decreasing? There will be more poor people? There will be less people willing to spend that much money on their education or on the children's education?
Well, it started about 15 or 20 years ago. I think the statistics show that starting in the early 80s, the inequity of wealth distribution in the United States grew and started growing. And you could see that since it was much more expensive to come to the school each year, and the wealth was distributed differently, that we were losing some diversity. We had some scholarships to try to rectify that. But I think in all schools, the really good schools, wealth began to reassert itself the way it had 100 years before. The scholarships help, but the problem is with the current financial crisis, most scholarships are done in a form of endowment. In other words, let's say Mr. X goes to Columbia and says, I want to have a scholarship for African students. So they'll say, well, if we want to hand out $43,000 a year, well, here's a formula. You have to set up an endowment, $1 million, say, and then we can take the $43,000 each year. So they take the $1 million and they invested it in the stock market. Now, in the last year, because of the collapse, at the journalism school, for instance, our scholarships are for international students are worth half what they were worth the previous year. A, and B, in some cases, because of New York State law, we can't even use any of the money. So this inequity will probably start growing more again. Although Obama, so this is the wild card, Obama has said that he wants to increase different things called Pell Grants and other devices that the U.S. has to subsidize education of individual students. So maybe they'll increase, they have loans, low interest loans and so on. Perhaps under Obama, because he and his wife grew up using this stuff, they will increase it. That would be great.
question on the diversity, it is, I believe it's very dangerous if the access to the profession is based on money resource.
Right.
So there might have to be a new role of government in the education sector.
You know, the United States is very different. I assume most people who would be watching this are Europeans. And one of my jobs at the journalism school is to orient the international students. I help choose them and so on. So I created a course called New York as a Foreign Country, which I teach in the first semester. And
In Kiswahili.
yeah, not quite. It's really striking that Western Europeans don't understand our system. I mean, I could see if someone from Bhutan doesn't, but our system is very different from Europe. The government doesn't really control education because there's no government. We have federal government agencies, state government agencies, and local government agencies. So there's no, usually education is at the state level, not the federal level. And it varies from state to state. And they don't have enough money, so they're not going to subsidize because as you go down the line, the tax structure changes. At the federal level, it's income tax, which is graduated. At the state level, it's somewhat income tax. And at the just a little bit. At the local level, it's all property tax. So it's very regressive. Mm-hmm. So you're asking basically the middle class to support education. And they're struggling anyway because of unemployment, and they have to pay for their health. They don't want to pay property taxes on their houses because they're having more and more trouble, so they will not politically support subsidies to education. Mm-hmm. It has to be done at the federal level.
Looking back in American history in journalism education, there was a lot of things also, a lot of help being extended to emerging democracies, to Eastern European states, to Ukraine, to all kinds of countries, for all kinds of reasons. Maybe not always the best intentions, but still, you see that changing. You see that this role of freedom of speech heralding, if you want, is not being done by the U.S. anymore.
Well, we had it for 8 years. We had to stop on the freedom of the press, freedom of speech issue because of Bush. We sounded like hypocrites. Now we can start again. The problem with that is, with the government doing it in the U.S., I don't know, I'm not as familiar with other governments, but in the U.S. it's very politicized, which makes sense. I mean, why give money out senselessly? So if you look back over the last 10 years, there was a flavor of the month. At one point, we were giving a lot of money to Cambodia for the free press. Then we were giving it to East Timor. Then we were giving it to Iraq, Afghanistan. Now it's going to be Pakistan. Central Europe and Eastern Europe, that was years ago. They're not really, there was a great fear because we didn't know who would take over. We didn't want fascists. But now that no one is worried because, hey, we're in Prague, it's beautiful.
But this is an emergency intervention then. It is not sustainable.
It's geopolitical action. Mm-hmm. If you look at Japanese foreign aid, a lot of it consists of material. So they're sending out Toyotas and Hondas and, four-wheel drives and so on. So, it's not horrible what the U.S. is doing, but it's not philanthropic. Mm-hmm. The American people actually believe that the U.S. gives out much more money in foreign aid than it does. So, frankly, I think we give less. The Scandinavian countries, Canada, the EU, I think as a percentage, some countries in the EU, as a percentage of GDP or as a percentage of per capita income, they're more generous than we are. But, it's very hard to explain the United States. It's most of us inside don't understand it. So there'll be foreign aid. And then we have foundations too, this is another unique thing. Foundations, we have an interesting tax system. First of all, we all pay taxes. In a lot of countries that doesn't happen. So there's a very good system, in fact, that if you donate money to a nonprofit foundation, then you can reduce that